It hangs above schools and courthouses. It flies from front porches and government buildings. It is carried into battle, draped over coffins, and planted in places few humans have ever stood. Across the world, the sight of red and white stripes beneath a field of stars is instantly recognizable. Yet most people never stop to ask where it came from. Who created the American flag? Was it truly sewn by Betsy Ross in a small Philadelphia upholstery shop? Why were there 13 stripes? Why do the stars keep changing? And how did a wartime banner, stitched together during a revolution, become one of the most powerful symbols on Earth? The answers lie in a story far older than the flag itself, a story of rebellion, uncertainty, war, and a group of colonies searching for an identity of their own. Before 50 stars could wave above a united nation, America first had to imagine itself, and that journey would leave its mark on every thread of the stars and stripes. Before there was an American flag, there was only allegiance to a distant crown. The 13 colonies along the Atlantic coast lived under the Union Jack, its crosses marking authority, trade, and control. For most settlers, Britain was not an enemy. It was the center of law, language, and identity. But as the colonies grew, so did a quieter tension. Taxes imposed from across the ocean, troops stationed in city streets, decisions made by men who had never set foot in the New World. In response, symbols began to shift. Not yet a nation, the colonies started flying their own banners. The pine tree flag of New England, the Liberty Tree imagery tied to resistance gatherings, the bold Gadsden flag with its coiled rattlesnake and warning, "Don't tread on me." These were not national flags, but declarations of attitude. Each one whispered the same idea, that identity was beginning to separate from the empire that had defined it. By the time revolution broke into open conflict, the colonies were no longer just protesting Britain. They were becoming something that had never existed before, a unified political experiment under fire. Yet unity was fragile. 13 colonies meant 13 identities, 13 militias, 13 competing visions of what freedom should look like. A single banner was needed, not just for recognition on the battlefield, but for survival as a nation in the making. Early on, the Continental Army fought beneath the Grand Union flag. It looked confusingly familiar, still bearing the British Union Jack in the corner, as if independence had not fully arrived. But change was coming fast. On June 14, 1777, the Continental Congress passed a resolution stating that the flag of the new United States would carry 13 stripes and 13 stars, symbolizing a union born from rebellion. No single design was officially fixed in that moment. Instead, possibility was born. The idea of a national flag had been declared, even if its final form was still taking shape in the hands of history. Among the many threads in the flag's early history, few are as famous or as uncertain as Betsy Ross. The story says she was a Philadelphia upholsterer who, in 1776, was visited by George Washington and asked to sew the first American flag. According to the legend, she suggested the now iconic five-pointed star, folding and cutting it with a single snip of cloth. It is a powerful image, a quiet craftsman shaping a national symbol in a small room, while revolution brews outside her window. But historians have long debated how much of it is fact and how much is memory dressed as truth. The earliest accounts of the Betsy Ross story did not appear until decades after the Revolution, passed down through family recollections rather than official records. There is no definitive document proving she designed the first flag, yet there is also evidence she did sew flags for the Continental Navy. Whether myth or reality, her name became woven into the identity of the flag itself. Sometimes, history is not only what happened, but what a nation chooses to remember. By the early 1800s, the young United States was still proving it could endure. Its flag had not yet become a symbol of permanence. It was still tested, still fragile, still learning what it meant to represent a nation under fire. That test came in the War of 1812. In September 1814, British forces launched a brutal assault on Baltimore, targeting Fort McHenry. For 25 hours, cannon fire tore through the harbor. Smoke and thunder swallowed the sky. Soldiers waited through the night, unsure if the fort would still stand by morning. And then, through the fading darkness, a massive American flag was seen still flying above the walls. Francis Scott Key, watching from a nearby ship, saw that distant image and wrote words that would become the Star-Spangled Banner. In that moment, the flag was no longer just a wartime identifier. It became a statement of survival, a promise that the nation itself had endured the storm. After survival came expansion. The flag no longer marked a fragile republic on the edge of the Atlantic. It began to stretch westward, following wagon trails, railroads, and the steady push of settlers into unknown territory. With each new state admitted into the Union, a new star was added, quietly rewriting the flag without ever changing its voice. 13 stripes remained fixed, a memory of origin, but the field of stars became a living record of growth. From Ohio to California, from Texas to the vast frontier lands, the United States expanded faster than any symbol could easily contain. The flag adapted in silence, its design changing again and again as the nation grew larger than its founding generation could have imagined. But expansion was not without fracture. The Civil War split the country in two, and for a time, the same stars and stripes were claimed by both sides of a divided nation. Yet even through conflict, the idea of the flag endured. It was not just territory or government. It was a question of what the Union meant, and whether it could survive its own contradictions. By the 20th century, the American flag had traveled far beyond the fields of early battle and frontier towns. It now moved through a world shaped by global war, industrial power, and technology that could carry its image farther than any generation before had imagined. On a volcanic slope in the Pacific during World War II, Marines raised the flag on Iwo Jima. The moment was not quiet. It was raw, chaotic, and uncertain. Yet the photograph captured something enduring, a flag planted in the earth as a signal that the fight for the island had turned. That image would become one of the most reproduced photographs in history, freezing a single instant into national memory. A few decades later, the flag went even further. In 1969, Apollo 11 carried it beyond the atmosphere and onto the surface of the moon. On a silent gray landscape, it stood in stark contrast to the emptiness around it. No wind moved it, yet it still appeared to wave, shaped by its own frame and the weight of meaning behind it. From island cliffs to lunar dust, the flag had become more than a marker of nationhood. It had become a symbol carried into places where nations themselves could not follow. The American flag is often seen as a Finnish symbol, 50 stars, 13 stripes, a design fixed in place since 1960. But in truth, it has never been static. It is a record that keeps updating itself in fabric and memory. Each stripe still carries the echo of the original colonies, a reminder of where the story began. Each star marks a point where the nation expanded, broke ground, or redrew its own boundaries. Together, they form something closer to a timeline than a decoration. It has flown over revolution and civil war. It has been raised in moments of victory and moments of uncertainty. It has been used as a rallying point, a protest symbol, a promise, and sometimes a question. And yet its meaning has never belonged to a single moment or a single group. It shifts depending on who is looking at it and when they are standing beneath it. That is what gives it endurance, not perfection, but continuity. Not silence, but interpretation. Long after the first flag was stitched, and long after the last star was added, it remains something the nation returns to again and again. Not because it answers every question, but because it remembers everyone that came before.